men have become more and more well adapted, not only to the presence of the male dominance hierarchy, but to the ability to move up it. And that's the central spirit, you could say, in some sense. That's the central spirit of the individual. The individual is the thing that can move up dominance hierarchies. It's the thing that's at the top. It's the eye at the top of the pyramid. And it's been selected for. And then what's happened is that we've watched, so we get better and better and better for biological reasons, culturally mediated, at figuring out how to climb across a set of dominance hierarchies so we can leave a genetic contribution. That's what's happened to human beings. Now imagine that that's happened for 6 million years. So now imagine that we started to watch that, because we're curious creatures. We're always trying to figure out who we are. And then as we watched that, we started to tell stories about what the people who could climb the hierarchies were like. Those were heroes. That's where hero mythology came from. And the biggest hero is the person who'll go out and kill the snake. Well, unsurprisingly, because that was a big hero, man. And maybe when we were living in trees, that was a hero. So the big hero is the person who goes out, slays the dragon, gets the gold, brings it back to the community and distributes it. He's also the person most likely to go up the dominance hierarchy. He's the person most likely to find the virgin, right? Because it's a virgin that you free from the dragon and you get to claim her, right? And so the dominance hierarchy is a mechanism that selects heroes and then breeds them. And so then we watch that for 6 million years. We start to understand what it means to be the hero. We start to tell stories about that. And so then not only are we genetically aiming at that with the dominance hierarchy as a selection mechanism mediated by female choice, but our stories are trying to push us in that direction. And so then we say, well, look, that person's admirable. Tell a story about him. And we say, this person is admirable. Tell a story about him. And this person is admirable. And at the same time, we talk about the people who aren't admirable. And then we start having admirable and non-admirable as categories. And out of that, you get something like good and evil. And then you can start to imagine the perfect person. That would be not only so, it would be you take 10 admirable people and you pull out someone who's meta-admirable. And that's a hero. That becomes a religious figure across time. That becomes a savior, a messiah across time as we conceptualize what the ideal person is. And in the West, here's how we figured it out. We said the ideal person, the ideal man, is the person who tells the truth. And what that means is that's the best way of climbing up any possible dominance hierarchy in the way that's most stable and most lasting. That's the conclusion of Western culture.
So in a sense, psychologically, when you talk about postmodernists and their rejection of these classic male structures, what they're doing is realizing that they're not going to compete in the classic as stated male hierarchy, so they're creating their own version of it.
Mm-hmm. Sure, that's the creative element. Sure, well, we asked earlier, what's the motivation of these pathological guys who are out there like bolstering up the feminists? Yeah, well, you know,
they don't compete any other way.
They don't compete. They figured out how to compete. They compete as allies, let's say. Mm-hmm. Very sneaky.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Sneaky.
Yeah.
And that's how everybody always describes them too. When I mean, it's almost like I avoid doing it because it just almost feels gross to label them like that. But that is the way you think of male feminists. You think of them as sneaky. And
it's creepy.
And discriminatory towards classic male behavior.
Yeah, well, and no wonder.
Yeah.
They haven't got a hope of competing in that hierarchy.
Wow. That's deep. That is deep. This is going to be hurtful to a lot of people. There's a lot of people listening to this right now, very upset.
Yeah,
very triggered.
You asked earlier why the postmodernists don't like blunt speech.
Yeah, that's why.
That's why, man. You know, it's like the truth is something that burns. It burns off dead wood. And people don't like having their dead wood burnt off often because they're like 95% dead wood. And I'm not being, believe me, I'm not being snide about that. It's no joke. When you start to realize how much of what you've constructed of yourself is based on deception and lies, that is a horrifying realization. And it can easily be 95% of you. Things you say, things you act out. You know, it's, well, you see that in Pinocchio, which I often discuss. You know, Pinocchio, when he gets corrupt as he matures, he first learns to lie. And then he becomes a braying jackass on Pleasure Island. It's like, and he's threatened by the underground authoritarians, right? They're going to sell him to the salt mines. It's like, yeah, that's for sure. It's exactly right, man. So then you figure out you're a braying jackass and you're lying all the time. That's a terrible realization. And then all that needs to be burnt away. And the people don't like that. You know, it's...
Now, you've been